Freedom. It's a word that echoes through the ages, a concept that has inspired revolutions and ignited the human spirit. But what does it truly mean to be free? Is it simply the absence of restraint, the ability to do as we please without consequence? Or does it run deeper, encompassing something more profound and enduring? True freedom, the kind that fosters lasting peace and prosperity, is not a free-for-all. It is a delicate balance, a carefully crafted framework where individual liberties flourish within the protective boundaries of a just and equitable society. The separation of powers, a concept as elegant in its simplicity as it is profound in its implications, stands as a bulwark against the concentration of authority. It is the embodiment of the adage, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. By dividing the powers of government among distinct and independent branches, we create a system of checks and balances, a system where ambition is made to counteract ambition, ensuring that no one person or entity can wield unchecked control over the reins of power. This separation, however, is not merely a matter of organizational structure. It is a reflection of a deep-seated belief in the importance of limiting government power and safeguarding individual liberty. It recognizes that power, like fire, is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Left unchecked, it can consume, corrupt, and ultimately destroy the very freedoms it is meant to protect. The genius of the separation of powers lies in its inherent dynamism. It is not a static, unchanging concept, but rather a living, breathing principle that adapts and evolves to meet the ever-changing demands of governance. It is a conversation, a constant negotiation between the different branches of government, each seeking to fulfill its mandate while respecting the roles and responsibilities of the others. In our interconnected world, where the forces of globalization, technological advancement and political upheaval are reshaping the geopolitical landscape at an unprecedented pace, the principles of democracy and the rule of law are facing unprecedented challenges. From the rise of populism and authoritarianism to the spread of misinformation and the erosion of trust in institutions, the very foundations of democratic governance are being tested as never before. It is in this context, against this backdrop of uncertainty and change, that the separation of powers takes on an even greater urgency. It is no longer merely a theoretical concept confined to textbooks and academic debates, but a vital safeguard, a crucial line of defense against the erosion of democratic norms and the slide towards tyranny. Now, more than ever, we must reaffirm our commitment to the principles of limited government, individual liberty and the rule of law. We must recognize that the separation of powers is not a luxury, but a necessity, not a relic of the past, but a beacon for the future. As the sun rose over the ancient world, casting long shadows across the empires of antiquity, a profound truth was etched into the very fabric of history. Power, left unchecked, becomes a corrupting force, a cancer that eats away at the foundations of any society, no matter how mighty. From the sprawling Roman Empire to the opulent courts of the Chinese dynasties, the allure of absolute power proved to be an irresistible temptation, leading to a cycle of decadence, tyranny, and ultimately collapse. Monumental pyramids and opulent tombs stand today as silent testaments to the excesses of unchecked power, a surefire path to tyranny, instability, and the erosion of those very freedoms that make life worth living. The Magna Carta and the dawn of limited government. In 1215 at Runnymede, the Magna Carta was signed, laying the groundwork for limited government and individual rights. Forced upon King John by rebellious barons, it established that even the king was not above the law. It introduced due process and protection against arbitrary imprisonment. Though imperfect, it shifted the power dynamics, questioning the divine right of kings. The Magna Carta ignited a fire for freedom, inspiring generations to demand accountability and justice. It remains a cornerstone of Western legal tradition, symbolizing the quest for liberty and justice. Section 3. Enlightenment Ideals, Montesquieu and the Tripartite System. The Enlightenment, an era of reason and intellectual ferment, gave birth to thinkers who envisioned a world of freedom and individual rights. Among them was Charles de Montesquieu, whose work, The Spirit of the Laws, profoundly impacted modern political thought. Montesquieu's theory of the separation of powers became a cornerstone of democratic theory. He argued for dividing government into three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Each branch should be independent to prevent the concentration of power. Montesquieu's ideas inspired revolutions and shaped constitutions worldwide. The American founding fathers embraced his vision, embedding the separation of powers in the US Constitution. Montesquieu's legacy endures as a beacon of hope for freedom and democracy. Section 4. From Theory to Practice, the American Experiment. Across the Atlantic, a new nation was being forged in the fires of revolution. Inspired by Enlightenment ideals, American colonists sought to create a government based on the consent of the governed. The Founding Fathers knew that building a lasting democracy required a system to guard against tyranny. They created the US Constitution, a model for democracies worldwide. It divided government power into three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. This system of checks and balances prevents any one branch from becoming too powerful. The American experiment continues to evolve, facing challenges and striving for a more perfect union. The executive branch, the engine of action. At the heart of the executive branch stands the president, embodying the will of the people. As head of state and commander-in-chief, the president safeguards the nation's security and ensures laws are executed. Yet, the president is not a monarch but accountable to the people. The Founding Fathers circumscribed the president's authority, ensuring it is subject to scrutiny. The executive branch is more than just the president. It includes a vast network of departments and agencies implementing government policy. This bureaucracy plays a vital role in government, translating Congress's mandates into actions. From the White House to federal agencies, the executive branch embodies the nation's dynamic energy. The legislative branch, the crucible of debate. In Congress, the people's voice debates and crafts laws shaping the nation. The Senate and House, where diverse perspectives clash, embody self-government. The Senate, with 100 members, deliberates on long-term issues. The House, with 435 members, reflects America's diversity. Through debates and hearings, Congress tackles healthcare, education, and more. Here, public discourse translates into the laws of the land. The judicial branch, the guardian of the Constitution. In a quiet courtroom, the justices of the Supreme Court gather to adjudicate disputes, interpret the law, and ensure justice and equality. The Supreme Court's rulings shape American society, impacting civil rights, criminal justice, and the balance of power. Beyond the Supreme Court, judges and juries across the country grapple with the complexities of the law. The judicial branch operates largely outside the media spotlight. Its power lies in its rulings, interpretation of the law, and commitment to upholding the Constitution. The Founding Fathers ensured judges were insulated from political pressure with lifetime appointments. This independence is the bedrock of the American legal system. It is a beacon of hope for those seeking justice and a testament to the enduring power of the Constitution. Section 4. A symphony of governance. The interplay of powers. The separation of powers is a dynamic interplay, a delicate dance between government branches. Each branch is independent yet interconnected and dependent on the others. The President can veto legislation, but Congress can override it. Congress controls funding, but courts can challenge decisions. The judiciary interprets the law, but relies on the executive to enforce rulings. This system of checks and balances ensures no branch becomes too powerful. It protects minority rights and ensures the will of the people prevails. The separation of powers requires constant vigilance and understanding. Citizens and officials must defend it against those who seek to undermine it. Section 1. The slippery slope from erosion to collapse. The separation of powers is a delicate balance requiring constant vigilance. Decay begins subtly, like a hairline crack in a foundation. A charismatic leader might test boundaries, chipping away at constraints. They might circumvent legislative oversight or stack courts with loyalists. As transgressions become normalized, complacency sets in. Citizens might fail to recognize the danger, lulled into a false sense of security. But like a dam breached by tiny cracks, the collapse can be swift and devastating. Institutions designed to safeguard liberty crumble under authoritarianism. Rights like freedom of speech and fair trials evaporate. The erosion of democratic norms leads to the collapse of democracy. Vigilance is essential to prevent the slow decline into tyranny. Section 2. Echoes of tyranny, historical failures of separation of powers. History is filled with democracies succumbing to authoritarianism. The Roman Republic descended into dictatorship under the Caesars. The Weimar Republic's chaos led to Hitler's rise and World War II. Venezuela, Turkey and Hungary have slid towards authoritarianism. Leaders chip away at the separation of powers, consolidating control. These cautionary tales remind us that democracy requires active defense. Freedom is fragile and must be protected from tyranny. Section 3. Modern-day warning signs, the allure of authoritarianism. In our interconnected world, threats to separation of powers are pervasive. Populism, fueled by economic anxiety and social divisions, emboldens leaders. The internet spreads misinformation, polarizing societies. Social media creates echo chambers, hindering reasoned debate. Authoritarianism promises stability but leads to oppression. We must resist the allure of tyranny and defend democratic principles. Section 4. The price of complacency, the fragility of freedom. The separation of powers is a constant struggle, not a guarantee. Freedom can be eroded if not fiercely defended. Apathy and complacency have a high price, our freedom and rights. We must resist normalizing the abnormal and accepting the unacceptable. Hold leaders accountable, demand transparency and challenge abuses of power. Engage in reasoned debate and seek common ground. Pericles said, "Just because you do not take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you." Democracy's future rests on active participation. The fate of freedom depends on us all. Section 1. Checks and balances in action, contemporary success stories. Despite challenges, the separation of powers shows resilience. The struggle to maintain balance continues, reflecting the human aspiration for freedom. The United States exemplifies checks and balances in action. High-stakes confrontations remind us no one is above the law. The UK faced a constitutional crisis with Brexit, reaffirming parliamentary sovereignty. These examples show the relevance and resilience of separation of powers. Democracy is an ongoing process, not a spectator sport. It requires constant negotiation and shared responsibility. Safeguarding institutions and principles is essential for a free society. The separation of powers remains a vital safeguard against abuse of power. Section 2. Navigating gridlock. When separation of powers stalls progress. The separation of powers can sometimes lead to gridlock. Balancing effective governance with safeguarding liberty is challenging. Legislative paralysis can erode public trust in democratic institutions. The slow nature of democratic decision-making can feel inadequate in crises. The challenge is to make the separation of powers work effectively. This requires compromise and good faith negotiations. The common good must sometimes supersede partisan interests. Effective governance and safeguarding liberty must coexist. Section 3. Blurred lines, the rise of executive power in the 21st century. The executive branch has gained power, blurring separation of powers. This reflects the evolving nature of governance in the modern world. The rise of executive power is often justified by the need for swift action. This expansion bypasses traditional legislative scrutiny and judicial review. The executive branch often holds an advantage in shaping public opinion. Legislatures struggle to challenge executive actions effectively. Democracies must reconcile effective governance with safeguarding liberty. Strengthening oversight mechanisms and promoting transparency is essential. Civic engagement and critical thinking are crucial for democratic accountability. Section 4. Global perspectives, separation of powers in a changing world. As the winds of globalization carry the ideals of democracy to every corner of the globe, the concept of the separation of powers is increasingly embraced as a universal principle, a cornerstone of good governance and a bulwark against tyranny. Yet the implementation and interpretation of this principle vary widely, reflecting the diverse tapestry of political systems and cultural norms. In some countries, the separation of powers represents a radical departure from centralized power. Establishing independent judiciaries and empowering legislatures are essential. In other countries, building democratic institutions from the ground up is a daunting task. The separation of powers is a framework for reconciliation and equitable power sharing. The global struggle for democracy is linked to the fate of the separation of powers. As globalization reshapes the world, the need for accountable and transparent governance has never been greater. The technological tightrope navigating freedom in the digital age. The 21st century has ushered in an era of unprecedented technological advancement. The internet connects people across continents, empowering individuals in unimaginable ways. Yet this revolution brings peril, challenging democratic governance and balance of power. Social media fosters community, but also creates echo chambers, eroding trust and fueling polarization. Algorithms trap us in filter bubbles, reinforcing biases. Tech giants' power raises questions about privacy, freedom of expression, and democracy. When few corporations control communication platforms, the potential for abuse is immense. In this digital age, the separation of powers is urgent. We must protect fundamental freedoms online as we do offline. The siren song of populism, guarding against the tyranny of the majority. Populism, fueled by economic anxiety and social divisions, challenges limited government and the rule of law. Populist leaders exploit grievances, promising to overturn the established order. This rhetoric often masks a disregard for democratic norms. Populism claims a single unified will of the people, but in diverse societies, multiple viewpoints exist. The separation of powers protects against the tyranny of the majority. A world on fire. Climate change and the urgency of collaborative governance. Climate change transcends borders, demanding collective action and new forms of cooperation. Addressing this threat requires a coordinated global response, transcending ideological divides. Governments must work together, share information, and develop scalable solutions. The window to avert catastrophic consequences is rapidly closing. The separation of powers, that cornerstone of democracy, stands at a crossroads. The challenges of the 21st century have tested this system, exposing its vulnerabilities. Yet amidst these challenges, the separation of powers remains our best hope for a future where freedom reigns supreme. It is a testament to the enduring power of ideas, a reminder that the best defense against tyranny is its careful distribution. The defense of democracy requires constant vigilance and a commitment to upholding the principles of limited government. The future of freedom rests on the actions of us all. Let us rise to the challenge and defend the guardrails of freedom. As we stand at the confluence of history and progress, The concept of the separation of powers stands as a testament to the enduring human aspiration for responsible power, where liberty is safeguarded from tyranny and the rights of all individuals are respected, forged in revolution, refined through centuries and tested against evolving challenges. From ancient Greece and Rome to modern democracies, the idea of divided power resonates across cultures. It reflects our fears about power's corrupting nature and our belief in human dignity. The separation of powers is a living principle, enshrined in constitutions and democratic institutions, dependent on vigilant citizens, a testament to self-governance and hope. The story of the separation of powers is not a tale once told, a chapter closed in the annals of history. It is an ongoing narrative, a work in progress, a delicate dance between liberty and order, between the rights of the individual and the needs of the collective. It is a story that demands our continued attention, our unwavering commitment, and our willingness to defend the principles upon which it is founded against the ever-present threats of complacency, apathy, and the seductive allure of authoritarianism. The freedoms we enjoy today, the rights we often take for granted, were not won easily, nor are they guaranteed in perpetuity. They are the hard-won legacy of generations past, who fought and died to secure a better future for their children and grandchildren. It is our responsibility, as inheritors of this precious legacy, to safeguard it for future generations, to ensure that the flame of liberty continues to burn brightly, illuminating the path towards a more just and equitable world. Vigilance in the face of those who would seek to undermine our democratic institutions is not paranoia, but prudence. It is the recognition that freedom is a fragile thing, easily eroded by the slow drip of complacency, the gradual normalization of the unacceptable, the insidious encroachment of power unchecked. The struggle for democracy is a global endeavor, transcending national borders and cultural differences. The separation of powers has emerged as a universal principle and a cornerstone of good governance. From the streets of Hong Kong to the villages of Myanmar, the spirit of the separation of powers inspires resistance movements and constitutional reforms. The global trend has been towards greater freedom and accountability. The separation of powers remains a beacon of hope for justice and equality. The separation of powers is not a finished product, a static system to be admired from afar, but an ongoing experiment, a work in progress, a perpetual symphony of governance where the different instruments of power, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, must constantly strive to find harmony, balance, and a shared commitment to the common good. It is a system that demands our constant attention, our critical engagement, and our unwavering determination to safeguard it against those who would seek to exploit its inherent tensions for their own gain. The future of democracy, the fate of freedom, rests not on the shoulders of a select few, but on the active participation of us all. It requires us to be informed citizens, engaged in the political process and willing to hold our leaders accountable. It requires us to be critical thinkers, capable of discerning truth from falsehood, and resistant to the siren song of populism and the allure of simplistic solutions to complex problems. The separation of powers is not a spectator sport. It is a call to action, an invitation to participate in the messy, challenging, but ultimately rewarding work of self-governance. It is a reminder that freedom is not a gift to be passively received, but a responsibility to be shared, a legacy to be passed on to future generations.